Um, okay, you can see my screen, correct?
Yes.
I'll every time now to make sure I am recording and the like. Yes, it's recording. Okay, good. All right, so welcome to day 31. All right, this is what I was thinking. So this is for you, this is for everybody in the class. This chapter, if there was going to be one chapter out of the first 12 or 13 chapters that I'd skip, it would be this one. All right. Why? Well, first of all, they give you other ways of doing what we've been doing all semester. That's not a bad thing. All right. But most of the time when they give you ways of doing this, it's on model binding. And model binding, basically, it's a mechanism that maps client request data, so things like form values, route data, query string parameters, etc., to action method parameters. We've been doing that all semester. All right. I mean, you've been sending like things with an ID, to whatever. But what this does is it lets you work directly with strongly typed .NET objects in action methods. So you don't need to do a lot of manual parsing. And that's some of the stuff we have been doing. All right. I mean, why is that important? Well, one thing is it provides what's called type safety. It ensures that the action method values are of the right expected type. So there won't be any problem when it's expecting an int and you give it a string or vice versa type of an idea. Next, it can provide automatic validation for you. All right, you can easily check if data is valid, but we've been doing that with the model state.isValid. Finally, and this is one of the things that they claim at least, is that model binding eliminates a lot of the repetitive code that you would write otherwise. All right, so there's nothing wrong with it. I don't mean to demean it at all. But that said, like I said, the chapter is basically broken into two parts. The first part is all theory. That's about the first 16 pages of the chapter. And the second part is, I'm going to show you this. Again, this is not mine. I would never, ever claim this is mine. That said, I think this is the coolest project that we've done up till this point. It's a to-do list, but you come in here and add a task. So, I can put anything I want. So complete chapter 10, AW, lecture. It's a work thing. The due date, let's put, I don't know. I'll put down 10, 12, 20, 23. All right. And the status is it's open. And I click add. Well, you can see what's here and just what happened. All right. And what you're able to do now is we've been doing things like this, but we haven't basically filtered on more than one thing. What we've done so far is we have filtered on the product. And I shouldn't even say that. We filtered on the category. So you've had all here, and then you've had, bikes and accessories, etc. Well, notice it's set to all, but the category, if I go to exercise and I tell it to filter, it's not going to show anything because I haven't written anything yet for exercise. The work now, into the future, it'll still show it because we're not at 10:12 yet. All right. And for the status, if I go to completed, it again will be empty because we don't have those. So this is a fairly complex app. That said, there's only one controller in it. All right, which is kind of nice. And there's only a couple different view files in it. So what I'd like to do is to first, between now and whatever, is to go over the text that's in the class and then do this one. All right, that's what I plan on doing for this chapter. Now, the question is then, well, geez, do we have to do this? It's already in the book. No, but it gives me a chance to go over a lot of things that are in the chapter that we probably otherwise would not go over. All right, and that said, I'm looking in here. Now, we're up to chapter 11, which means, I'm sorry, chapter 10. So we're up to here. I mean, we're doing great as far as that goes. All right. And if we finish everything today, great. If it takes a little while tomorrow, fine. Tomorrow, we're going to move into chapter 11, which is on data validation. And you're going to find that, again, much of the material that's you've already done. You know how to do it already. All right. So when we take our next test, which will be hopefully next week sometime, we'll be through here. All right. Because your next test would be on 10, 11, and 12. But I'm not going to put anything in there from 10 because we're already doing some filtering. So it would be basically just on 11 and 12. Then what my hope is, we're going to go over chapter 13, which, as you can see, has nothing to do with the case study, but it's a full-fledged book website. All right, we're going to do that website, even though it's in the book. We're going to put our own little tweaks into it. We will do authorization and authentication, and we will use a different database than the one that they provided. All right, so that's the plan. Now, after we get done with that, and if you look in here, I already said you don't have to do the pig app. I don't care about a tic-tac-toe app. Maybe that's just me. It's kind of cool. So if any of you say, hey, I really would like the code for the pig app, or hey, I'd really like the code for the tic-tac-toe app, then send me an email and I'll see if I can get it for you. Okay. But I do plan on doing all of these. The only one that we may not do is 14. I'm not sure yet, but I'd like us to do those as a class. All right. And again, that means that by the time we get done with 12, we'll have just these left. Now, I'm working on a project right now, and I mentioned this the other day, but I want to say it again. What we're going to do when we hopefully have approximately 25 days, let's say, left in the semester, something like that. All right. Then what I'm hoping we're going to do is, let's say that we're right here, we're on 13. I'm going to spend 1 day a week lecturing. I'm going to spend 1 day a week going over like 13.1 or 14.1, etc. I'm going to spend 2 days a week going over this project that we're going to be doing together. And then your other day will be a lab day. Now, this project we're going to be doing together, I'm working on it now. I hope to have more time to work on it this weekend and next weekend. We're going to actually create an e-commerce site. What are you going to sell? Whatever you'd like, as long as it's within reason. All right. I'm going to be selling sporting goods equipment. So that's not what you sell. I want every person in this class to be selling something different to kind of assure that what I'm going to ask, and not today, because I'll write it down and put it out there, but I'm going to ask that people submit 3 different things that they wouldn't mind selling in an e-commerce store. Then I'm going to pick the one out of the 3. So if there's duplicates, maybe neither one of you will get it or something. I don't know. But you will be responsible then. We're going to create this project, I'm going to say from scratch. That said, it won't be an empty project. It'll be the ASP.NET Core MVC app, but we're going to write basically everything. And that's going to give us a chance to go over even some of the stuff that we didn't cover very well in here, such as we're going to put sessions in it and we're going to put cookies in it. All right. And what I'm going to ask, and Grant, you're familiar with this, and Andrew is not, Andrew's actually out of town right now, but once he watches this video, he's familiar with this. I'm going to ask that either at the end of the semester, everybody who's in the class take their project and put it out on Azure, and either using their project or using the Sports Pro app, make a 10 to 15 minute presentation on what you've done. So that's kind of what we have to, for lack of better words, kind of look forward to for the rest of the semester. All right. So with that said, then let me start to go into the chapter. And again, the hands-on test is due tomorrow. Now, like I said to you before, I'm having all sorts of first-year students come up to me and, "You give way too much homework. I have no time to do this," etc., etc. I work full-time, all right? I don't know how to answer questions like that. I really don't. I've gone to Evan about this. I've talked to our counselor about this. Our counselor has assured me that any student he talks with, he tells them, "You better plan on having at least 20 hours a week to dedicate to this class." And that's watching the lectures. So if I lecture 3 times a week, let's say 3 hours at a crack, that's half of it right there, which means you're going to have to spend 10 hours a week, and everybody's different. All right. You might get stuff done in an hour where it might take somebody else 6 hours, or vice versa. All right. But if people don't have the test done by tomorrow, will I take it if it's late? The answer is yes. But you'll lose points. I want to be fair to people who are turning in work on time. I would expect it then, if you don't have it done tomorrow, have it done by Sunday at midnight, along with your chapter 8 and 9 work. All right. I'm not totally caught up on grades. I'm getting there. Let's put it that way. All right. So let's get into the chapter then. So again, chapter 10 starts on page 367, how to work with model binding. Now, if you look in here, as it says in chapter 2, you learn how to post a strongly typed view to an action method with a parameter of the same type. So really, kind of since then, we've been doing things like, that if you pass an ID and you say that you've got a details view, for example, if that ID exists in the database, all right, then you should bring that ID up, that kind of an idea. All right. We've also looked at, in the last few chapters, having an ID and having that ID be of type string, and doing that so that either it can be empty or that we can choose all as a default. All right. So as they say there, model view controller automatically populates the parameter object with values from the view. This is model binding. So as you can see in here, this is broken into 3 parts. The first part is an intro to model binding. And as I mentioned, model binding is kind of a matching type of thing. And if you don't know what I mean, we'll get into it in just a bit. And then they give you some more skills for model binding. And then the rest of the chapter is on this to-do list app. So what I am going to do is, once we get to the to-do list app, I've got the code, yeah, but I'm going to key it in again myself and build it myself. All right. Now, I would suggest, even though you don't have to turn it in, I would suggest that between now and the end of the semester, you do the same thing. And what I mean is, this is a good enough app that if you tweak it a little bit, make it look like your own, etc., all right, you could put it out there if you wanted to on your portfolio. Now, if you say, "I wouldn't do that, it's Murox," then don't do it. It's okay. All right. But like I said, if you put the code in yourself and you tweak it, it's one you might want to consider putting out there. So that's what we'll do for the last part of the class. All right. So what they're mentioning in here is there's going to be 3 tables on the next page. And if we look here, it says the first table, figure 10.1 in table 10.1, presents 2 properties of the controller class. So this is another way that you can pass data. When we're talking about passing data here, in reality, what we're talking about is passing data from a client to the server. For lack of better words, you can look at our server as basically being the controller. All right. And you can kind of at least look at the view as that's what we're sending to the controller. Or you say, well, the controller is sending it to the view. I get it. but it's the ability to send information back and forth. All right. So we'll look at that. And then the second table, as it says, presents two properties of the request property. All right. And notice there's a query property and there's a form property. And if you notice looking there, they're both dictionaries, which means they're both set up as key value pairs. All right. Then we've got a route data property, again, another dictionary. All right. And then finally, there'll be some examples on how these are used. These may make a lot of sense. These may make very little sense. And again, the bottom line is there's a heck of a lot of information in these 16 pages. Some of it you're going to see put into action when we actually go in and write that to-do list app. That's my reason or rationale for doing it this way. All right. So I don't want to read to you. You can take a look there, the two properties of the controller class. All right. But notice from the browser to the server. All right. And then we've got queries and we've got forms. What they're going to get to is this. Think about how you pass data. All right. Basically, the way that we pass data, almost virtually the only way we passed it this entire semester, has been inside of our route. So you've had your route in like, like a home slash, I don't know what, whatever, /3 to go and look at record 3 or something like that. All right. But you can also pass data in other ways. You can pass data in directly from a form. You can pass data in using a query string. And that's what these examples are going to talk about in here. All right. So when you look, again, I don't think there's anything new here. I think that everybody in this class, or my hope is at least, understands what a query string parameter is. It's basically whatever comes after that question mark. So in this case, yes, that's a full URL, and the query string on it is page equal to. Nothing big there. I mean, hopefully that just makes sense. Now, other ways that you can pass things. All right, so they're showing another way second. Notice an action method that retrieves the value of the query string parameter. So what's that going to do? That's going to retrieve this, the page equal to, because that is the value of the query string. So the request query is allowing you to work with the query string parameter. All right. Now going on the other end, form data in the post. All right. And when we look right there, now we're retrieving form data. So you saw earlier, it was request.query, and now it's request.form. Well, the query and the form are what are shown right here, and the request is what's shown right here. And the route data, basically, even though we have maybe using those words, is what we've been using thus far. And the values are pretty much what you want to retrieve. All right. So again, if we take a look in here, an action method that retrieves the form data, notice in here, first name, first name. One advantage out of using some of these things is they're not case sensitive. So if I had first name here like this, and I put it here with a capital F and a capital N, it would still work. And again, they may not sound like a big thing, but it can be kind of a big thing. All right. Next, as they show right here, a URL with a value for the ID parameter of the default route. Well, you know this already. There is nothing new in here. So this would assume, all right, if index is showing a bunch of records or something, that by default, it's going to show everything. All right. So when we do that, as you know, we'd have to sit there and we'd have to have in our controller, we'd have to have a pattern set up with 3 different segments. All right, a default, which we, or a controller, which we default to home, a method, which we would default to index, and an ID, all right, which would be optional. So like I said, not really a lot new right there, but there's other ways that you can get it. So what they show right below this, other way that you could retrieve that value, all right? And notice it's route data dot values. All right. Now, when you start to go through this stuff, all right, what they'll get to next is retrieving get and post data. But one of the things they're going to get to in here, and they're going to talk about eventually, is there's a natural order that the system goes through and looks for things. And it'll look for whatever it's looking for, it'll look in three places. We'll get to that in a minute. But you can circumvent that and tell it that rather than looking in three places, just look here or just look here. All right. So it says, although you can access form, route, and query string data directly as shown previously, all right, in the previous figure, there are drawbacks. All right. It says first, using this can get repetitive. Second, you have to manually type case sensitive key names that, again, as we've seen before with other things, are not checked by IntelliSense and they're not checked by the compiler, so they can lead to runtime errors. All right. Third, as it says there, the values are strings. So you've got to cast them to the type you're looking for. What you're going to notice too, when we look at the example later and we look at the to-do list, they did some stuff in there that's a little hinky, for lack of better words. And what I mean is, as an example, when they used some stuff in there where they worked with dates, rather than declaring it as type date, they typically declare it as type string. Why, I don't know. All right. So as it says here, model binding fixes these problems. And there's the key word there. It works by automatically mapping, I guess, keywords. All right. As it says, you don't need to specify whether the route is in the form or the route or the query string, because as I already mentioned, the model view controller checks all three of them by default. And I think that's the order in which it checks first. It checks it as well. It checks first to see if it's in the form, then if it's in the route, then if it's in the query string. All right. So it says first it looks in the body of the post request. If it isn't there, it looks in the route values provided by MVC routing. If it isn't there, it looks in the query string. All right. I already mentioned that it's case sensitive. If it doesn't find what it's looking for, it sets it to the default value for the data type, meaning if it's a string, it'll be null. And if it's a number, typically you'll be working a lot with IDs here. So if it's a string ID, it would be null. Or if it's an int ID, it would be 0, as they say here. Finally, as they say, another benefit, MVC automatically casts a value to the type of the action method parameter. All right. And if it can, as it mentions, it won't take a string and cast it to an int, right? Because it can't do that. It doesn't know how to do that. So we still have to go and check the is valid property in the model state. And we've been doing that all semester to make sure that before we allow anything to either be added or updated into a database, that we check first so we don't let any bad data in. All right. Like I said, not really anything new right there. All right. Now, when you look on here, it says an action method that uses model binding to get a string value. This is kind of what we've been doing. All right. Yes, the ID is a string. And then here, we're just setting it equal to a view bag. All right. Here's those three types of data. So where are you getting the information from? Are you getting it from a post request? One thing to remember about a post request, we've talked about get, we've talked about post. All right. And the get basically, most of the time at least, is showing you data. The post is where you're submitting data. Now, is that always the case? No. In fact, when we worked on this in the AWD1000 class, sometimes you would go and submit something where the type was a get. And you would do that if what you were submitting had no sensitive information in it. All right. In other words, it didn't have passwords or credit card numbers, etc. If it did, you use the post. Remember, the main difference though is when you post, all right, let's put it this way, when you do a get, the information is up here in the query string. When you do a post, the information gets buried, for lack of better words, inside of the body, the HTTP header that goes with the post. All right. So when you do a post, it can be a lot bigger than a get. All right. Gets are what are normally associated with cookies. All right. So here we're getting it as a form parameter. Here we're getting it as a route parameter. Here we're getting it as a query string parameter. And as mentioned previously, this would pretty much be the order that you'd look for. Now, I don't want to read it because we've already talked about it. This is what they consider to be the benefits of model binding. All right. And as they mentioned there, it automatically maps data in the HTTP request to an action method's parameters by name. It's basically, in my opinion, is what we've been using for most of the semester. All right. Now, complex types. Well, everything we talked about so far basically deals with simple data types. In other words, an int or a string or a float or a double or a decimal, etc. Even date time, I believe, even though date time is a class, it's considered a simple data type. But model binding will also work with complex types. So if we look in here, this is going to be more symbolic of the kind of thing we're going to be looking at soon. So notice we've got a public class to do. All right, now we'll have more in it than this, but this is just assuming that every to-do that we have in our to-do list has three things: an ID, a string, and a date time. And you'll notice that other than the ID, every field has been set up to handle nulls. All right. I have not yet gone back and checked the errors that were in my hot number 4 test. But one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go back and I'm going to attempt to remove each and every warning that I have. If that means I'm putting question marks all over the place, I'm going to do that. All right. I've been going out online and looking at a lot of code lately, and we're going to do something a little bit different when we start today. Do you have to do it? Well, the stuff we've done so far worked without it, but I'm going to show you a couple things after the break that we're going to start doing today. All right. So if you notice in here, what's happening? These are parts of an object, but we're able to use them in here, and the system uses them as though they are simple parameters. All right. They're not, it's treating it, all right, as though rather than it's being an object, that it's basically just two different parameters. All right. And is that big a thing? Yes, it is. All right. Because as it says, to add a new to do, whatever we're passing in as the description that's the description. Whatever we're passing in as the due date, that becomes the due date. All right. And as it says in here too, when you look, this is something kind of new. This may be one of the first times, if not the first time, when we've said name equal. And if you remember, when we're setting up a form, we've got ID equals and we've got name equals. Well, ID has always been for one basic thing. The idea has been so we give a component a name so we can style it. More than anything else, that's what we've been doing with the IDs, really for 3 semesters. But in here, the name attribute, and notice there is no ID attribute in here because we don't need one, all right? But this name attribute is what we're going to be using on the server side, all right? And again, you'll notice we've got name equal description, name equal due date, the same thing we had on the previous page, all right? So when we do that, and then we come in and we do an add, notice we can use the ASP-4 and we can use and basically bind so the system knows that this field and this field go to these 2 fields. All right. So when it says it allows you to bind complex types, I kind of look at it as though it allows you to kind of break apart a complex type into its components. All right. Like I said, maybe that's not a great explanation. I don't know. Now, how to use model building with nested complex type. What the heck does that mean? Well, if you think about it, we've had times in here where you'll have something like maybe we've got an incident type. And that incident type, as part of what it has in it, the incident type has got a technician. So it's a type within a type. That is typically referred to as aggregation. Now, one thing that we've looked at, and this is nothing new, I'm just going to bring this up very quickly here, and that is one thing that we've looked at is we've looked at inheritance. And with inheritance, it's an is a or an is an type of relationship. What do I mean? Well, a checking account is a bank account. All right, that kind of thing. All right, when you're talking about inheritance. On the other hand, all right, what we're talking about here is what's typically referred to as aggregation. And that is a has a or has an type of relationship. All right. What do I mean? Think about an automobile. All right. And an automobile has an engine. An engine, has spark plugs, that kind of thing. That's that kind of relationship. So it's not inheritance. All right. It's when something basically contains something else. And that's kind of what we're talking about in here. All right. So it says the last figure showed how to use model binding with complex types. However, it's common to have complex types, a type nested inside of another type. And they use our teams thing as an example. All right. And you remember when we did our teams view model, that's pretty much what it looked like. Right. So each active conference has divisions. Each divisions has teams. Again, that's not an inheritance relationship because you don't say a division is a conference or a team is a division. It's an aggregation type. All right. So they show that, and then it says here, how can you basically set that up? Well, notice teams view model, and they just give it a name. All right, model. And then again, you're able to go in there and pull out. All right, you're able to go in there and pull out the components from there that you need. All right, and that's pretty much what they say right here. That one of the strengths here is it allows you to bind complex types that are nested within other complex types. And there's 2 ways you can do it. Typically, you do it using the ASP4 tag helper. All right. And they mentioned if you don't use that, you need to use dot notation to identify and kind of work your way down. They don't show an example of that here. All right. Fact it is. Here it is. Well, it's not a great example. All right. So some of the stuff that's in this next section, for lack of better words, is a little bit hinky. And if you say, I don't know what you mean, you will when you see the examples. Now, how to use the submit button to post a value, right? It says you can use the submit buttons to post data to the server, all right? And if we look at the example here, the idea is there's the button. And when you click, you can post something, all right? You can post it to the server. Now, that's not bad, all right? I don't know if I wanted to say that, to click that and know that it's my favorite team or whatever, but I can live with that. What I'm not nuts about is doing it, because rather than doing it with the actual field name, they're doing it with the actual ID. All right. Now, most people would be bright enough that they would know that SEA, they could figure out that that was Seahawks. But imagine you were trying to do something like that and you had a whole bunch of products. And if the products had similar product names and you were using the IDs, and if the IDs were similar, that could make it very hard. So I don't know. I mean, they show this to show you that you can do it. I'm not sure exactly why you'd ever want to do it, is what I'm saying. All right. And they mention in here then, as it says, you should by now understand the difference between an input element and a button element. The input element is a self-closing tag. All right. The button element is not a self-closing tag. Typically, with a button element, you've got to be much more precise and let the system know exactly what it is you're trying to do. If you think back to the days of JavaScript, all right, when we used an input and we said type equals submit, boom, it had an exact meaning, or type equal reset. But if we put other buttons on a form or whatever that we wanted to do other things, all right, and you made a type button, you were typically calling then a JavaScript routine in order to get that done. And that's pretty much what they're saying in here as well. All right. How to post an array to an action method. All right. It says one scenario where this is useful is if you want to filter data by multiple criteria. Now we're going to do something similar to this, not identical, but when we look at that to-do list app after the break, all right, we're going to talk about something that's similar to this. And if you look at the example here on the next page, you'll notice it's kind of two-pronged. All right. So what is this? I mean, what are we talking about here? These are all, this is going to list everything. Let's just say that it's whatever, they're gifts. These would then be gifts under $10, gifts $10 to $50, and gifts over $50. So we're filtering that way. And the other filter that they're coming up with, color. Gift was a crummy example. Maybe it's cars wouldn't work either. It's not really expensive enough, but you can hopefully get my drift. So when we look at the example in just a few minutes, I mean, there's a lot of typing. There's some work to be done with that example. All right. But with that said, all right, you're going to notice that you're going to literally have, I think it's 3 filters. You're going to filter based on the to-do list type. You're going to be, and it'll have in there, like I said, work, exercise, and there's all, and there's a few other ones. Then we're going to do it on basically the due date. All right. Is it due now? Is it due in the future? Or is it overdue? All right. And what's the other one? I don't remember offhand, but there's another one that's in there as well. All right. And we will be doing this. As it says, we will be passing an array to an action method. That's one of the reasons, like I said, when we did this, or I want us to do this example, because I think it very much illustrates some of the stuff that's in here. And since we're not going to be tested on this chapter, and since, the only homework you're going to have for the chapter is going to be trying to get this to work on your project, on your Sports Pro project, that this will give us a chance to actually see it in action, so to speak. All right. How to control the source of bound values. Now, notice what it says here. We learned earlier, model binding automatically checks for names in multiple places. Okay. But there's even more to it than that. What do I mean? Well, if you look here, there's 3 additional things that we haven't talked about. The from form is basically when it looks for something in the post request. The from route is, as it says, when they're in the route parameters. From query is when it's in the query string. All right, but then notice what else is there. From header, from the HTTP request header. All right, again, that could be sensitive information. That could be something else. All right, from services. Every time we've gone into, I'm going to say this again, every time we've gone into the startup.cs file, or I'm sorry, the program.cs file, that we've gone in there and we've done something in that builder.services. All right. That we have been injecting in there. All right. We have been injecting into the app. And we will continue to do that. And there'll be a couple of other things we'll look at later. Finally, there's the from body, which, as it says, that's the body of the HTTP request, often used when JSON is involved in here. All right. I looked at these. I can sort of understand what's going on. All right. And if you look at the examples and you read the stuff at the bottom, it does make some sense. All right. It's not easy. All right. That's not why we're not going to be tested on it. All right. Like I said, I just think the way that we've been doing things so far has made sense. All right. We mentioned previously that there's a 3-pronged thing that it has in here, that it'll look through the form, it'll look through the route parameters, it'll look through the query string. But if you want to, you can tell it to not use any one of these. So not only is there a bind, but if you don't want to use something, there is a bind never. Kind of like the validate never that we've used on more than one occasion. All right, when we've been doing our working in our models. So as it says, bind allows you to list the names of the properties that can be set during model binding. Bind never says those properties should never be set during model binding. All right. And if you want to use these are the namespaces that you have to add. So the only one that they're using in here for bind, as you can see, is job title. And the one they're saying bind never is manager status. So it's a Boolean. All right. It's a little bit early, but the next thing to do again is the to-do list app. We're going to spend literally a couple minutes right now, then we'll take a break. So as it says, the chapter finishes by presenting a to-do list app. It allows users to store a list of tasks in a database. All right. Now, we're not going to do this. What they say is true. If you haven't already done so, if you run the update database, it will work. We're going to give our database a little different name, just so if you wanted to, you could have them both in there. The user interface will be shown on the next page. And as it says, it consists of 2 pages or 2 screens. The first is the page. And then we have, let's bring it up in here. So this is your home page. As it says, with no filtering, meaning everything is set to all in here. Then we look at it with filtering. All right. So as you know, I'm not saying anything you don't already know. These are all work categories, whether they're due in the future, overdue, or due now, but they have to be open. All right. And then finally, when we want to go and add a new validation message. Okay. So when we want to go and add basically a new to do. All right. And in this case, as it says for the due date tomorrow doesn't work. It's looking for a date. Again, I'm not sure why they did it this way, but what they've done in here, even though they're using date values in fields like this, they're not making them date pickers. To me, that would have made the program so much slicker. And that's one thing that, if you've got time and desire, you might want to take a look at, because then it would be yours. It wouldn't be, Murox, because you'd be incorporating your own stuff into it. All right. So it is 12:58. Let's come back at 1:10, and we're going to start by going in and creating the model classes. So I'm going to create a new folder right here that I'm just going to call to-do list. Right? And that's what we'll work on. So I will see you back here in 10 minutes. I have no water, so I'll be right back. All right, it's 1:10, so I'm going to start back up. Again, this is the to-do list right here with nothing in it. So I'm going to start up, close both of these. And we're doing it all from scratch here, so. And I'm just calling my project to-do list demo, and I'll call the solution to-do list app. I mean, I can give it the same name. It really wouldn't matter. All right, we're not configuring for HTTPS. It doesn't matter if this is checked or not. So, all right, so we get our typical type of startup project. Now, we're going to look at something a little different here, and that is we're going to start the way we have started several times. I'm going to do a tools, NuGet package manager, manage, putting in have been these. So here and doing Microsoft entity framework dot or entity framework core dot tools, which I'll do right now. All right. And under browse, and there's tools. So we'll put that in. I'll do it in a second. And then we'll also put in SQL Server. And we'll do that in just a minute. But one thing I've been noticing is I keep getting the same kinds of errors when I'm doing my project. And usually it's because something has not been filled. Even though I've done some kind of a query, all right, it's as though the query isn't finding the information it should. So I looked online, and when I started to do this stuff, to teach this, I looked at a bunch of examples online. Well, one of the ones that I found, though, was people are recommending that we download this package as well, the Microsoft Entity Framework Core, in addition to the tools and the SQL Server. So I'm going to use all three of them. So here's Microsoft Entity Framework Core. I'm going to add that one. Accept. And then next, I'm going to go after the core. I'll go to tools. And there's that one. And again, I will install that and accept. And finally, I will go over to SQL Server, which I spelled wrong. And there's that one. And again, I will install and accept. Now, for the first time, I have three when I come back and look at this, or I should have three. When I come back and manage my packages for solution and I go to installed, I have core, I've got SQL Server, and I've got tools. Now, if you look under the core rather, it says it supports link queries, change tracking, updates, and schema migration. It works with all sorts of different kinds of databases. I don't know if that's why I've gotten some of the errors that I have, but I'm going to go back and I'm going to add that to my hot 4. First, I'm going to remove the migration and the database, and then I'm going to add Microsoft Entity Framework Core, and then do another add migration and another update database. I don't know if that'll solve some of the problems I've had or not. I really have no idea. I don't think it'd hurt though. So I've got those. Next, as we oft times do, I'm going to come into appsettings.json. All right. And we're going to add, and just so you know, if you wanted to, You can add this anywhere. It doesn't have to be at the bottom. We could add our connection string thing right here if we wanted to. All right, you don't have to put it where we've been putting it, just a commonplace to come down here and then do your connection strings and do it like this. All right, I'm just going to call this to do context. And you know the drill by now, so. I'm going to call this task list DB. And you can call it what you want to call it. So and finally, our multiple active result sets. I like to always go back and just review to make sure I didn't type in anything incorrectly. Yep, I spelled multiple wrong. I think that's all correct. And again, call it what you're going to call it. There's no biggie one way or the other. So save all. And next, I'm going to go in and make my changes to my program, my program.cs file, I believe. So I'm going to do a file, save all on this, and then close this. And it's to do context. So in my program.cs, and I probably should copy it because we've done it enough times, but I'm going to try putting it here anyway. So we'll see if we can get it to work. So builder.services. Add DB context. Again, we may get errors here because we haven't created that context file yet. So that's to do context. So I said, if we get an error there, don't let that throw you one way or the other. Options, it's going to be a lambda. All right. That's configuration, not configure. Right? All of them. Configuration. I think that's correct, though, the way it is. Dot get connection string. All right. Again, hopefully this will flush its way out once we go in and create the to-do list context file. All right, so I'm just going to save this, but I'm not going to close it. So I can look at it later. Now I'm going to go into my models here. And I'm going to create a few of them. I'm going to start with the easy ones. So let's go down to class and let's make a category class. All right. And That's it for that one. So again, I can come in here and do that equal string empty, and I can come in here. It's not going to hurt anything to do that. So that has now removed all of my warnings. All right, that's the first one. We've got another one that's very similar to it, and that is status. So this will be the category. Again, this is going to be work or home or exercise. This is going to be the category of to do that we're working with. So let's do a file save all here. I think we can close this one. All right. And then next we're going to do status. All right. And this will be pretty simple too. Be almost identical to the last one, except it's status ID instead of category ID. All right, so there's that one. And again, I'll put a question mark here, which will remove any warnings that I have in there. All right, so let me save that and close it. And next will be the to-dos themselves, which is the most complex out of all these. So that'll be to-do.cs. All right. This will be an int. All right. And then what we're going to have in here is going to be a description, a due date, a category, and a message, which has got our status. All of those are going to be required, and all of them will have their own error messages associated with them. In addition, we're going to have a little method that we write that's going to check to see if the status is open and the due date is less than today's date. The reason for that is if something is open and it gets past today's date, hopefully what's going to happen then is it's going to run the warning class on it, turn it kind of an amber color. Just going to steal this and then work off of that every time. So this will be our foreign key. All right. And then we'll also have a navigation property in here. And even with that, I've been kind of struggling because with some of those navigation properties, all right, sometimes I go in and I do set them. I put the question mark here, so that goes away. Sometimes I don't. All right. And there's not really a lot of rhyme or reason to when I do it and why I do it. All right. It just sometimes it seems like it makes sense to do it, and other times it doesn't, which is kind of a dumb rationale. All right. And after category, we've got status. And again, I'll put a question mark here. Oh, I'll do a string empty. And we're going to put a navigation property in here as well. And that one, we will put the question mark right there. All right, finally, this thing for overdue. And that is, to my knowledge, that is everything. So far we came in, we set up our app settings.json. All right, then we came in and worked with our program.cs file. Then we added the category model. Then we added the status model. And then we added the to-do model. Now we're going to add another model, not now, because it's not going to be part of the database. These three tables, a to-dos table, a categories table, and a statuses table, those are going to be our tables. So I'm going to do a file save here, or save all, and close my to-do. And now I'm going to make my context file. All right, first thing we want to do, as always, is we want to come in and put that using in here. So using Microsoft.Entity Framework Core. All right, we need that. And next, we need to come in here and make this inherit from the content. Then we need to set up our constructor, and we've done this enough times that hopefully at least it just makes sense what we're doing here. Okay, and that's everything. Again, I like to put this on another line. By no means is that necessary. You need this, and we need the word options in here because I didn't put it in one of the earlier ones that we did. Okay, so we're ready for our DB sets, and there will be 3 of them, and then we'll put in our seed data. Now, for our seed data, we will put in the categories, we will put in the statuses. We are not going to put in any seed data for the to-dos. It's not that we couldn't, but we're going to start out with an empty list or an empty to-do list. All right. The way they spell that, so I'm going to spell it like that. All right. And then we need to do, again, add our seed data. So want that true there. You do want a semicolon at the end. And let's start adding the data. All right, and there will be 5 of these. So I'm going to copy this down. I don't need the comma there, but let's change these. So we've got home, EX for exercise, shop for shopping, and finally call for contact. All right, that's our first one. And then we need our 2 different statuses. We just have open and completed. So let me copy this. And to my knowledge, at least, that's everything that goes into there. All right. So let's go back to this one and let's see if now we get anything. Let's see. There's the using, so that worked. This doesn't like something that I've got in here, so let's take a quick look at it.
Mr. Scott, I think last time we had that builder in front of configuration.
Oh, right here. Okay, builder dot
Yeah, after the use SQL
right here.
server, yeah, builder dot.
Okay, looks good. Thank you. Thanks for the reminder. All right, so that should be everything. All right, so you can tell now what we've done. Now, we are able to now go in and let's see if we can create our database. So let's do a file, save all. I'm going to close this so I have nothing open. All right, I'm going to go into my package manager console. And do my add migration. That's a good start. There's our migration file, so that's good. And our update database. Okay. All right, no yellow or green is good. Yellow typically just is a warning, but I like to have nothing there if possible. So we've now got the database, or should. So I'm going to go back into my SQL Server Object Explorer, refresh, go down here, open up the database. I think we called it task list DB under tables. All right, there's my 3. My to-dos should be empty. My statuses is right here, and there's the setup for it. And they should just have 2 records, if you call them that, in there. Open, Close completed, open, open, okay. And for our categories, there's our categories, and they're all in alphabetic order the way they're run. That's fine. All right, looks good so far at least. Now, the next thing we're going to put in here is we're going to add another model class. Remember that model can be used for basically two different things. All right. In the category, in the status, and in the to-dos, those are tables. But we can also use the model class to hold our logic. So we're going to come in here and we're going to create a new class and we're going to call it filters, plural, filters .cs, and there that is. All right, I think we're going to need this using system.collection.generic. I think we're going to need that. I'm not positive, but when I did it the first time, I did. So let's start, as we oftentimes do, with writing a constructor. All right. And I don't like the way that this looks, so I'm going to fix that. But we are going to pass into this a filter string. All right. Now, I want to take a second as we're going through this and explain exactly what's going on here. All right. What is going to happen? And I already showed you this before, but I want to show it to you again. I'll go back to the book, I guess, to show it. So we did the entity classes. All right. So that's all done. We did the database context class. Now we're doing the utility class for filtering. Now let's just look at this. It says the app uses this class to help filter tasks. Remember, we've got, if you remember when I ran this, the completed version at the beginning of class, we had three different types of dropdowns. We had a category dropdown with home and work and etc. We had a due date dropdown, which is going to be like future and overdue, etc. And we've got a status, which we've already seen is either open or completed. All right. Well, just like we had done on the test for the bike shop, all right, we want to set this up so that we've got a dash separated string that's got these three filter values. So by default, it should say all dash all dash all. All right. And you can figure out the other permutations of that. All right. So as it says here, to start, the constructor stores this value in a property named filter string. All right. And we're going to use the null coalesce operator that, as it says right there, if the string is null or empty, the constructor will store a default value, all. In other words, if we don't specify anything, it'll default to all for each one of our dropdowns. Next, as it says, the constructor splits the string at the dashes, and it basically creates an array. Why? So we've got the property that we can just work with the IDs, category IDs. We can just work with the due dates, and we can just work with the status IDs. Now, as it says there, all three of those properties are going to be read-only. So there'll be no set in any of those. All right. Then after that, as it mentions, it defines rather the filter class three read-only has properties. And what that'll be is has category, has due date, and has status. And again, as it says, they work by checking whether a filter value is all. If it's not, then you're not selecting everything. So as it says, the user has selected one or more values to filter by. So as it says, the property will be set to true. Otherwise, it will be false. All right. It's not really that tough, and there's not really that much to put in here. But after this, as it says, we're going to provide 4 different properties for filtering by due date. All right. we will have a dictionary that'll have our do filter values, which will say future, past, and today. Now, again, the way they've set theirs up is if you've got a to-do that's overdue. So let's say I had said return library book, and it was yesterday because I know today they'll start giving me a fine. All right, but it's today. So it's going to come out and it's going to be the warning color. If you want, you could make that danger. All right, doesn't really matter. All right. So those are what's going to appear drop down list. As it says, this code defines the property as a dictionary rather than a list because it provides a way to capitalize values. So it displays it to the user in capital letters, but when it retrieves it, it'll have it in lowercase letters. It says, that's why it says there, the keys are in lowercase and the values themselves are in uppercase. In a way, this is kind of like when we have a select list and you've got a value that shows on the screen and another value that's stored in the database. It's the same type of an idea. All right, then we've got 3 more read-only properties that's going to indicate, as it says, whether the user wants to filter by due dates in the past, by due dates in the future, or by what's due today. And as it mentions there, it'll check the value in the due property. So it's right here, but I'm just gonna literally just start typing. All right, so there was the context class. We already did that. So this is the filter class. Like I said, not real big, but I'm going to put it in right now. It's about 35 or so lines. All right. And again, what that line right there that I just put in is saying is if we have not put anything in, so if we're not passing anything. So in other words, it's the equivalent of saying if we are passing a controller in and a method, but we're not passing an ID. All right. So have it default to all. Then we split those so that we're able to start working with them. And when we run the split command, we'll split on the hyphen, but that's going to create an array. All right. And we're going to split it based on the hyphen. Like that. Now, one thing that I've always thought about this language, you may agree, you may not agree with me, but to me, it seems like if there's an easy way to do something and there's a hard way to do something, they virtually always seem to pick the hard way. I have to think there's an easy way of doing it than the way they're doing it here. And again, could I be wrong? Of course I could. So the category ID, that's going to be equal to filters 0. All right. Don't know why it's giving me that error, but we'll look at it in a minute. Due, not due date, due is going to be equal to filters 1. And finally, the status ID is going to be equal to filters 2. Now let's look at why we're getting these. Probably missing a using, but I don't know. No. All right, the name category ID does not exist. We don't need this. I don't know how that got put in there, but it did. Generic. Models, classes, filters. Public oh, no, that's okay. Filter string. This should be a capital F. So that's filter, and that should be a capital S. So filter string equal filter string question mark, all, that's correct, string filters equals, and that should be filter string like that, split. Category ID is filter 1, ID is filter 3. Now, there's probably a real simple explanation as to why this isn't showing. Not sure right now what it is, but let me check something quickly here. I'm just wondering if I put in this. Will that get rid of those errors? No. Huh. These are all giving me the same error. Trying to think of what I did when I did this the first time, but it's been a while. I'm just going to leave those there with those errors. Okay. And hopefully it's going to work its way out in just a little bit. But that is the class that we're going to be using to do our filtering. All right. So let's save this. Again, I'll keep it open. And I want to go over to controllers and I want to open up my home controller. Again, this is, I believe at least, this is the only, this is the only controller we're going to work with. As always, I'm going to remove the diagnostics. I'm going to remove the logger. I'm going to remove the privacy stuff. We won't use that later. So we've again trimmed this down. We're going to write a little bit of stuff in here. Now, normally, the only thing that we put in here is index. All right. But we're going to have more than that. Okay. And that is, we're going to have a few more things. We're going to have an index, but we're also going to have an add method. All right. And then a post add method. And then a filter method and a post edit method. So normally we'd put this in multiple controllers, but for whatever reason, they decided not to do that here. So now you may have noticed this before, but I'm going to come in here and say this, try it again. Private to do context. And you may have noticed this before, or you may not have. But if I do this, and I'm going to do this, there's an underscore here, which means typically when you make private variables, you keep the underscore in there. It's not mandatory. I have not been doing it. All right. But typically that's what you do. And it also basically says that this is read only like that. All right. But what I've been doing all semester is basically this. So I'm just going to keep doing it that way. I'm just telling you that because sometimes people do things in different ways all the time. Let's make our controller, our constructor rather. And remember from last time, if you'd prefer that instead of writing this one like this, you can also write it like this with the lambda expression and put it all on one line like that. All right, and I'll leave that there just so you can make your own determination over which one you think is better. All right, so now we're going to go in and we are going to start working in our index, okay? So let's put a comment here that says load the current filters and data necessary. And we're going to put that into view bag stuff mainly. Oh, that shouldn't have said that. All right, let's change this. It should just say ID. All right. Well, we're getting an error because the index is going to expect there is a string ID in there, which will fix that. All right. Now we're going to start loading up the view bag. I'm getting a lot of errors that I'm not normally getting, but I am. So no. All right, so we're going to be checking all of our filters. Again, what's wrong with this? I don't know. Boy, oh boy. I don't think I'm missing anything, but maybe I am. So I'm getting the same doggone error all over the place. Whoa, 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 whoa. Jeff, come on. Okay. I'll look at this during the break too, because I'm missing something. Copy this down twice. Okay, this is a little screwed up, but let's fix it. Two. Oh, that's correct. Okay. I actually think it's right. So now I'm going to have an add. Just a curly brace there. There we go. Yep. And since we only have the one controller, we don't have to list the controller here in our redirect to action. All right, not too much more. We need our post for our filtering, our post for our editing, and then that'll be it for this. So this is going to join them back together, the opposite of the split we did earlier. And we're going to look and see how this is explained in the book in just a second. Correct. Well, there's many errors in here that are going to have to be rectified, so. So as you'd guess, as it says right here, this is when we want to edit, if we want to try to come in and edit an existing to-do. Index. Oops. All right, and like I said, there's a bunch of errors in here. It is 2:06. It's a little early, but I'm going to give a 15-minute break as I try to figure out what all my errors are. So, or a 14-minute break. Let's come back at 2:20. And when we do, we will write the underscore layout, the view imports. I think we've already got our view start. And then we've got a couple views. Neither one of them is that long, so we don't have that much to do. All right, come back at 2:20, please. Some stuff here. Errors. All right, it's 2:20, so let's talk about the multitude of errors that I had in here because I fixed them. All right, first thing, back in the home controller here, for some reason on one of these, I think it was the status ID in here on one of them, I didn't have T dot. So it was one of these, I think. So that was an error. Secondly, there should have been a comma right there. That was why I was getting that error. So in your post for your filter, all right, and I'm going to do a save all and close that one. Then in the filter itself, all right, there was a bunch of stuff that was missing. I just didn't put it in. So in other words, we stopped about right here. That's why we were getting all those errors. But you have to add this. All right. Now, you may have already looked in the book and seen that. I'll leave that up there literally for about 2 or 3 minutes. So again, we are in the filters. All right. Considering declaring this property nullable. Yeah, I was going to say when you do that, it always leads to other errors. So I don't want to do that. All right. But you have to come in and you have to add this stuff. So underneath where we have the constructor, that's all I put in here. So underneath the constructor, you've got a lot of stuff to add. And again, if you don't want to look at my screen, you can go look and check it out in the book because I want to go over what's in the book next. And hopefully these at least make sense because it's saying if you have chosen a category, it won't be all because you've chosen a category. Same thing with the due date and the same thing with the status. So I'm going to move this up just a little bit. So I'll put this so it's on top, because that's everything. So you can let me know when you got everything in there, please.
Okay, I think I've got everything.
You good?
Yes, I think so.
Okay. I'm going to do a file save all here, and hopefully you don't have any more errors. I apologize for, I don't know where I am today. Okay, so next, I'm just going to quickly look in my views folder. View start, that's pretty much a given. Imports, yeah, that's pretty much filled in for me. All right, so those are both good. So let's do the under shared, let's do your underscore layout file. We're going to make this really trim this down. So it's only about 20 lines or so. All right, we need Bootstrap. For the title, we're just going to make this say literally the hard code my tasks. Okay, whoops, I didn't end that. There we go. All right, we don't have any of our own CSS, so we can get rid of those. If you want to leave them in, it wouldn't hurt anything. We're going to really cut this down. We're going to get rid of virtually everything that's in the header here. And we don't need the script stuff or the footer at the bottom because there's no footer on here. You can leave that script stuff in there. It won't hurt anything, but there's really no reason to do that. So let's rewrite this. We've got our div class equal container. Let's put our header in there. Okay, I don't know why I've got that here, but I do. Okay. And once I'm done with that, I've still got stuff to go. I mean, I still have to go in here and create. There's 2 view files that have to be created yet. All right. One of them is for that ad that we said before, and the other one is our index under home. So we'll do those in just a second. But before we do, I want to save this. And all I want to do, I don't know if it should compile unless I have errors. Okay, that's fine because we're going to change this in just a minute. But we've got the my tasks, so that's good. And then we got to build what's going to go over here too. All right, so let's work on that now.
Mr. Scott, I actually have a couple more errors on the home controller still.
Sure.
Um, my first is actually the index. It's saying that I only have one return statement on the.
Yeah, oh, thank you. You're right. You've got to take this I had that inside of the if. You got to pull that out because there only is
Okay.
one return. All right. No, that's, I'm glad. Thank you for asking. All right.
Okay, that fixed that one, and then it says I have 3 errors, but I only see 2 of them. It's down right at the bottom in the last post with the selected statements. I've selected ID and not selected .id. Okay, that just
Again,
I
I
just
don't,
looked in warning.
know if we put a question mark here. Nope. That's like I said, that's one of the things that I don't like about this language. Sometimes it's very hard to figure out, okay, it could be null here. You want a question mark. Where do you want the question mark? Type of an idea. You've got all your errors fixed?
Yes, I do now.
Okay,
Thank you.
great. Oh, not a problem at all. All right. So let's go into our home. And right now we've got an index and a privacy. Well, we're not using privacy anymore, so I'm going to delete that. And we will add our add one in just a minute, but let's work on the index one first. All right. We can keep, if we want to, I guess we can keep homepage in there, but I'm not even going to do that. All right. I'm going to get rid of everything. And remember now, remember, we want to check it. If a task is overdue, we want to color it with a warning color. All right. So first, this is going to be an IE enumerable because we don't know what kind it is of to do. So again, that is basically saying that if we do have an overdue task, we want to turn the color of that. We can test that in just a bit. All right. Now, what we're going to build in here is something that's going to have basically 2 columns in it. All right. So what I'm telling you is if we look at this, well, over on the side here, we're going to have our 3 drop downs. And then over here, we're going to have our to-do list. All right. Just say it like that. Now we're going to end up having we're going to end up having quite a bit of stuff in here. How's that? Starting with a form. Now let's just see. So I'm going to do a file, save all. I'm coming right back to it, but I want to see if this has got our first drop down list in it. There it is. Okay, it's not showing the drop down, but there it is. Okay, so that's what we just built. Now leave that there, and then we'll go on and we'll do the other ones as soon as you say you're ready.
Mine's working too. Thank you.
Good. All right, I'm going to cheat, and I'm going to grab this and make a copy of it, and then make changes to it. So I'm going to put it right below where it is. Maybe that's not a good thing to do, but that's what I'm doing. So this one is going to be due. All right, so that should be the second one. Let me double check. Okay. And I'm going to copy it one more time. And this one is going to be, I think it's status. All right, and then what's left are the buttons. So for filter and for clear. All right, so that should be building the first three drop downs now, unless I made any mistakes. And that's what's going to be in the small and above. It'll be 2. So it should be right here. There we go. All right, I guess I could use some work here as far as moving that down. I'm just going to cheat for now. See if it'll take a couple of BR tags. There we go. Okay, so we've got that done. So now we've got to do, again, this was for size 2. Now we got to do for 10. And this is, for lack of better words, this is going to be our table of to-dos. You have all this?
Yes, I'm good. Thank you.
Good. Okay, there's our headers. Okay, good. And this last different button will allow us to edit or delete. And this, we won't go anywhere because we haven't written that one yet. That's fine. Should be everything. Are you all caught up?
Yes, I just got there. Thank you.
Okay. Now, again, the add won't work because we haven't written that yet. All right. Doesn't really look any different, but we haven't added a task yet either. So that's going to change what's in here in just a bit. So I'll do another file, save all. We've got to write the add, but before we do, let's jump back for a second into the book. I wish I had not closed it. I guess I did. All right, so we talked about the filters. The home controller, as it says, the index action has a single parameter named ID. All right, as you know, MVC can bind this parameter to a post request. Yep. All right, so to start, the index creates a new filters object and passes the ID parameter to the constructor. Next, it gets lists of categories and status objects from the database. In other words, it's going to fill that thing up. All right. The view uses these lists to create the dropdown. Yep. That's what's going to be passed in there. To keep things simple, this action method uses the view bag to pass the list to the view. Again, they could have really exploded this program and made like a view model and done other things in here. All right. After storing data in the view bag, the index method retrieves tasks to display from the database. We don't have any. To start, it builds a query for to-dos and the related category and status objects. Then it uses the has of the filters object to add where. So in other words, if you aren't choosing all for everything, it's going to go down and filter to just what you asked for. All right. The first add action method handles all get requests. To do that, it gets lists of category and status objects from the database and assigns them to the view bag. That way, for lack of better words, they're available. All right. Remember, one method, it's available program wide. The second add method, as it says here, handles post requests. It has a single parameter named task. Right. It says model binding starts by searching the body of the post. And since this method handles post requests, the values for this task argument are always posted from the add page. As a result, the name of the elements must match the name of the properties in the to-do object. All right. Add makes sure there aren't any validation errors. To do that, it uses the model state.isValid. If there are not any, the code adds a new to-do object. This is all stuff we're going to do in just a moment, but we don't have the add there yet. All right. If there are validation errors, basically it's just going to push you back to where you were. All right. Then it says part 2 shows the last 3 action methods. The filter action method, as it says there, has a parameter named filter. That's an array of strings, so you can figure out how, if or how you want to filter. All right. The mark complete action method has a string parameter named ID and a to-do parameter named selected. All right. And I just want to make sure when we look at that in just a second that I've given you all the code that was in here. All right. So in other words, I think we've got this and this, but I'm not positive. So I'm looking in here and I'm thinking I may have only in the home controller. We have to see where we are. We only may have gone this far. All right. So let's look at the home controller and if necessary, add some additional code here. All right, so we've got the post add is the last, nope, the post filter is the last thing that's in here. So post add, post filter, that's this. I don't think I put in this, any of this stuff. The post mark complete and the delete complete. I don't know what the heck happened because I just don't know. All right, so I'm going to grab that stuff right now and you can type your stuff in too. So this will go at the bottom of your home controller. Right after your filters thing. I'm just going to type it in here and then copy it over. Notice it's using the from route in there. So there's the first one. I'll leave that up there for a second. That should be correct.
Mine looks good too.
All right, great. So then let's do the other one here. See, I wish in this book I could just do this and copy, but of course they don't let me do that. I can create a note, which is why the heck I'd ever want to do that. I don't know, but I don't think there's any errors in there, but we'll find out when we run it in just a minute or two.
Okay, mine's caught up too.
Close that. And underneath in our views, under home, this is about 35 or 40 lines, so. right, I'm gonna copy this down, but make some changes, a lot of changes. All right, then there's a couple more, and they're pretty much just like the first one. They are due date and status. To my knowledge, when you get that done, that should be everything. So I've saved it. I'm going to try running it and see what happens.
I'm done. I'm ready to run it.
Well, I've got an extra double quote there, but I don't think it's hurting anything. Thought we're supposed to have a status in there. I think if I add, I don't think it's going to work. Yeah, you must enter a status, but it's not giving me the drop down. Something's wrong in there. The good news is that's working. All right. In fact, let's see if I leave all of them empty. Well, I can't leave this one empty now, but yeah. Okay. So first thing I want to do is right before this button here, I'm going to put in again another couple of line breaks. And let's look at the status. Okay, that shouldn't say status. That should say status ID there and there. And we again have to go and build that. So I'm going to grab this one that's right here, copy it, and make changes. Okay. Like I said, I'm not sure exactly where my mind is today, but not really here, I guess. Viewbank.statuses, status ID, and name. Hoping that's everything, but we'll look in just a second. Let me know when you got it done, please.
I'm ready.
All right, file, save all. All right, let's see if we can add a task. Again, wash the car. It'll be home. Due date, I'll make it 10/21/2023. And the status, well, that's screwed up, but I'll try to fix that in a minute. We'll say it's open. All right. And you must enter a status. Well, that status is still screwed up. Status ID, status, type equal. New select list, view bank.statuses, status ID name. Oh, that's bad because I don't see anything that looks wrong here. Due date. Whoa, that's it. There's no input in there. Get rid of that line, please. That's, as you know, that's part of the problem when you do copy and paste. So. All right. Having problems with wash the car, so let's wash the dog. Home. Now I should have in here the drop down. There we go. Open. Add. Oh, they're good. All right. So let's put in I'm not going to filter here. Let's add another task. Grade homework. Category will be work. The due date I'm going to put in here today. And I'll leave that status as open. So I've got one of each. All right, let's add another one. And let's make it exercise. Go to gym. Exercise. Let's make that overdue. And we'll still have it open. So that is different color like it should be. Good. So we've got a contact. We don't have a contact. We got an exercise, a home. Okay. Buy new sneakers. That'll be shopping. We'll make that due. And we'll actually have that one completed. All right, let's do one more. And that'll be call mom. Contact. All right. So if we start to filter now, contact only. There's the contact. Exercise only. There's the exercise. Home only. There's home. Shopping only. There's shopping. Work only. There's work. We may change that back to all. As far as due, let's have anything that's past due, and we've already seen that. Anything due today? Yep, great homework. All right, let's change that to all, and let's do the status. Let's look at completed. There's that one. And let's look at open. As far as I can tell, it's working like a charm. It's doing everything it's supposed to do. All right, did yours work when you brought it up?
Yeah, mine looks like it works.
Great. Right. So let's finish this up quick. First of all, like I said, I've got a couple double quotes in here I've got to look for, but I'll leave it open so I don't forget to do that. And if we look just at the end of the chapter here, all right, the layout, I don't think there was anything special in there. So I don't think we have to really go over that. It was pretty darn simple, really. That was it right here. That's the whole thing. The index, not too bad. But again, we came in here and we used that. So the name equal. All right. So we were able to use a little bit of the model binding in here that was shown at the beginning. Okay. And they mentioned that in here. So. And the home ad, well, again, I think by now, maybe I'm wrong, but that's pretty much makes sense. Now, if you look down towards here, it says all four of these elements use the ASP4 tag helper to bind the element to the property of the model. This accomplishes two goals. Number one, it makes sure the name attributes of the tags match the property names of the add action method. Second, if there's a validation error, you've already seen that because I put in some validation errors. The view is in two columns. Yep, we already know that. So that was we had the 10-2 and the 10, or 10, the 2 columns and the 10 columns. All right. That is what I wanted to accomplish for today. For tomorrow, I'm going to go over this. It's a little longer chapter. It's about 40 pages, but how data validation works in Model View Controller. All right. Much of the stuff there, much of it, not all of it, but much of it, we've talked about already. All right. We'll do that. And then at the end of that chapter, we actually will, because let's see, where are we here? So that'll be chapter 11. We will build this quarterly sales app. I don't know if we have time to get that done tomorrow or not. I have absolutely no idea. But if I move this down, just so you can see what it looks like, there it is. And as you can see, it's got built-in validation, and it's a little better than some of the stuff we've had before, such as, notice here, this is Katherine Johnson. We put her down as manager, and we're saying a person can't report to themselves. All right. Here we're trying to put in somebody who's already in the database. All right. Not a lot of specs. They're right there. So we'll do that tomorrow. We'll go over chapter 11. If we don't finish it tomorrow, we'll finish it then on Thursday, and we're going to then jump right into the next chapter, which will be chapter 12. Okay, that's all I had. Thanks for sticking around, and thanks for sending me that email. I appreciate it. I'll see you tomorrow.
No problem. See you tomorrow.